Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dubcast. Today, we are chatting the Matildas 5-0 win over Malawi in Kenya as part of the FIFA Series. You've got myself, Poletti. I'm being joined by Matt Olsen. Matt, this is a 5-0 win. This was, one-way traffic from the get-go. But that being said, Malawi did put up a fight at certain points in this game. They had a chance just before halftime to make it 2-1, which could have made the second half very interesting. But overall, it was a Matildas victory, and it was a well-deserved Matildas victory.
I think, going into it, that's exactly what we pretty much would have expected. The stubborn nature of having those star players kind of start the match into, the younger players coming through, and our overall quality being sublime enough for a 4-0, a 5-0 scoreline as we got in the end. And Malawi were rightly pretty stubborn and probably better than most onlookers were expecting them to be. I think, if you kind of build that one up, what your first impression of what, the game and the spectacle is going to be is essentially what's exactly played out before us. I will say, we can discuss this at length a lot more, Poletti, but just seeing the likes of Holly Mack, Caitlin Torpey, Winnie Heatley, Letitia McKenna be so involved and at the forefront and actually there in the Matildas kind of hierarchy now, for me, it's just really good to see that. And the fact that it's had to come in Nairobi, of all places on planet Earth. Crazy set of circumstances ahead of us. And of course, as of the time of recording, we're about half an hour from Kenya and India kicking off. So another big game, but again, one of those tests where rotation's going to have to be the name of the game going forward.
Yep, so by the time you listen to this, you'll know whether the Matildas are facing Kenya or India. They'll face the winner of that game on Wednesday night / Thursday morning, depending on which team they play, depends on which time slot they play in, I believe, is my understanding of how the schedule is supposed to work. If they're playing India, it'll be the earlier game. If they're playing Kenya, it'll be the later game. That's my understanding. Please don't quote me on that. But by the time you listen to this, you'll know exactly what time the game kicks off and, which team they're playing. I'll start on the Matildas side of things first. Van Egmond opening the scoring 5 minutes in. Sam Kerr doubling the lead just before halftime. And then in the second half, a first goal in over 1,100 days for Alex Chidiac in a Matildas jersey, which was then complemented by Holly McNamara and Letitia McKenna, who subbed into the game, did McKenna, and got a goal on debut for the Matildas. I wanna pick. We know what Sam Kerr. We obviously expect her to score. Van Egmond, we expect her to score. Chidiac has come in part because she hasn't been selected in squads, and then when she has been selected in squads, she hasn't played a ton of minutes. Against Jamaica in Newcastle, I believe it was, from the top of my head. So the 2023 Cup of Nations, we're going back to before the Women's World Cup. That was before probably a lot of people had ever watched the Matildas for the first time. Was the last time Alex Chidiac scored in the Matildas jersey. This is remarkable.
Yeah, it is, but it speaks to Chid's career, I think. Just someone who's been a stalwart, always been there and around in familiar environments, always reliable at A-League level, pretty reliable as that depth player for the Matildas. So yeah, just really, really pleased because, she is genuinely, like, in terms of, like, Australian football personalities, male and female, how can she not be everyone's favourite, right? Like, she's an awesome character, just really, really cool to see. Chid's obviously get those minutes again because of the calibre of opponent and the circumstances around why we're here at the FIFA Series, but a sublime finish. Like, it was just, the ability to back herself, dribble, open up the shot. It just, like, she's someone that is technically very, very good on her feet, and that was just prime Chids. It was really, really nice to see.
Yeah, for me, I think Chidiac has been one of those players where a lot of coaches just haven't actually known how to use her and utilize her to, her best ability. Like Jeff Hopkins has probably been the exception to that rule because every time she's come back to Australia in a Melbourne Victory jersey, she's just looked absolutely sublime. Look, I'm not going to pretend like I've watched a ton of her in Italy this season, but it's generally speaking, a lot of coaches, have just they've had trouble, fitting her in a lot of different systems, and Hopkins really hasn't had that struggle, and so it's nice to see her be able to perform like that for the national team, particularly when she didn't get a minute at the Asian Cup, and I think when she was named in the squad, a lot of people went, "Huh, Chids? Oh, Chids? Okay, sure, let's go." Like it came as a shock, right? And I certainly think I was one of those people. But this is what she can do when she's at her best.
And again, just to the point, I think the fact that she's always been reliable and she has had the longevity, I think it really counts for a lot. Again, this team obviously is here to sort of gear themselves up for a World Cup campaign with a lot of these answers or questions that need to be answered, and I think one of the biggest is how do you sort of mould the squad together when you've got such an attractive core. It comes with blooding a player like Chids back into a system and an environment where she can feel comfortable and just no matter rain, hail or shine, be able to perform at her best, and it's just that reliability that's been really crucial. I think one of the biggest things for me, Poletti, though, to point out about this game is actually just seeing more of that depth actually shine in a way that it recently hadn't. Tony G was always about throwing these players in at the deep end. I think back to that. I mean, this was 2022. I think back to the 7-0 loss to Portugal or Spain that we ended up having in one of those games.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 7-0 to Spain, and I want to say final score was 1-1 with Portugal in that window.
Sure,
I want to say
but
where basically all of the starters were rested.
Yeah, if you kind of compare it though, like that's the approach that he had, right? And I think again when we look at a game like this, just seeing. Obviously, Hayley Razzo was honestly one of the poorest performers we had. And so seeing again the likes of, Winnie Heatley step up, she was awesome. Obviously the beautiful moment with Letitia McKenna. My mind is obviously going blank while I'm trying to talk about it, but, just seeing, seeing a lot of those players pop up, I think it's been really beautiful. Holly Mack was good, and Caitlin Torpey as well, another one that I was really big on, getting some minutes over the Asian Cup. Just really beautiful to see this, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Look, you mentioned the core of the squad there, right? And we sort of, when we, myself and Christian did our sort of like our squad announcement, episode of the Dubcast. One of the big things that Joan Montemuro had talked about was continuity and, connections and, all that sort of thing, and making sure that, the players could work together and continuing to build on that. And we saw today when the lineup was announced, that it was pretty close to what you would call full strength, given the players that are available in this squad. I think probably only Amy Sayer and Alana Kennedy on the bench were probably the two, I guess you'd say, big absences from what you might have expected. What I mean by that is sort of like, if those two were in the starting 11, you would have said, okay, this is 100% a full-strength squad based on who he has available and selected in camp. We know Steph Catley had to withdraw, picking up, I believe it was a hamstring niggle, or calf tightness or something like that. The day the squad was announced and she was named in it, in a game with Arsenal, and so she was withdrawn from the squad and hasn't been replaced in the squad available. But we saw Chids come in. Caitlin Torpey sort of towards the back end of the Asian Cup really made the spot her own to an extent. But you also brought this up. in the Ramble Australia group chat was at halftime there was only one substitution that was made, and that was Remy Simpson on for Sam Kerr in a game where the Matildas had looked quite comfortable. They had that 2-goal advantage. Yes, Malawi had that chance just before the halftime break, which was fantastic effort by Mackenzie Arnold. Not absolutely brilliant there. But halftime presents a good opportunity there, I think, to make change, and Remy Simpson being the only change there really surprised me.
No, it's baffling. It's baffling because when you consider the impact that a lot of those depth players ended up having on the game and actually breaking through that really stubborn line. I mean, let's not forget how many times Rasio in particular was caught off and things like that. Malawi, for their level, played really, really well. And so for me, it was just about being able to, because of that, under the circumstances, bring those players in at an earlier opportunity and then present the opportunity for Letitia McKenna to, maybe in, a 5-minute window score 1 goal. Give her the whole half. I just don't think it's that complicated. And the level that was presented was still, I would say, high enough for it to be a good learning curve. And I mean, Kenya or India will be another step up that'll be better for these players. What I would hate to see is a full rotation to the point where we approach the final. I mean, obviously, it's not like we're actually playing for any meaningful silver or anything like that, but the ability to, have a full rotation after that fact, that would be quite reminiscent of Tony G if he went out and did that. So for me, half time, it was the perfect opportunity to actually see those tangible changes. Already got the lead, just thrust those players in, and it didn't happen. So yeah, don't know what to think.
Yeah. So of the players available in the game, only 4 of them didn't see any game time. The 2 goalkeepers, and then the 2 inclusions into the squad, Izzy Gomez and Jess Nash, who weren't part of the Asian Cup squad. Neither of them saw game time, so I think those are 2 players you'd absolutely want to see in the game against either Kenya or India. Again, you'll know who the Matildas are facing by the time you listen to this. We don't as of recording, so that's why we keep on saying Kenya or India. It's not that we've made no qualms about the fact we're recording this basically immediately after full time. So it is what it is. Then obviously there were the second half substitutions. So Sayer and Kennedy coming on in the 58th minute, Rankin and McNamara in the 66th minute, and then Letitia McKenna in the 78th minute. I mean, given, again, the way the game played out, it was just the continuing of that performance, as you said. And so I was like, why this didn't happen, why some of these changes didn't happen earlier in the second half is a baffling one. I'm sure Joe Montemiro will have his reasons, and I'm sure we'll find out, again, after we've finished recording. On the Malawi side of things, one thing that, I've been very vocal on, and anyone who follows me on social media will knows that I've been very vocal on this, was the absence of the Chewinga sisters, Tabitha and Temwa Chewinga. Tabitha plays for Leon. They've changed their name so often, I'm just going to call them Leon. Don't ask me what it actually is. She scored a goal in their Champions League game against Wolfsburg just before the window started. Temwa Chewinga, reigning NWSL MVP for Kansas City, had just come back from injury, so she missed Malawi's last window as well. Played 41 minutes and got an assist in just Kansas City's second win of the season in her only game back before this window started. Both ruled out here through injury. I feel like this game would have been more competitive had, arguably their 2 best players been available, Matt.
Yes. I think though the standard of the squad seems to be still pretty high. You've got some pretty prestigious clubs across that sort of Central to Eastern African, bubble where some of these players are playing. I mean, a club like TP Mazembe has 2 or 3 players in the Malawi squad. TP Mazembe are, a globally renowned, club in the DR Congo, right? Not having those European players is a big difference, and I think with Kenya, I know Kenya have a few sprinkled around some leagues in Europe. India, obviously, we know they've got the Peruvian-based player whose name is not going to come to me. It's 9:45 at night. Leave me alone.
It's Manisha you're thinking of.
You. But no, look, I just that for me was irrelevant anyway. I think if Chibangas ended up playing, the emphasis would have been on sort of the defensive work rate anyway, right? And I think in attack, Malawi didn't actually pressure and push enough. There was that one chance that awkwardly came off Arnold's face at a really high pace, and then she's ended up gloving it afterwards. But again, just all things considered, this is a team that's ranked 140 spots below us. They played pretty well. Again, I think the beautiful thing about the format, the beautiful thing about the uniqueness of the situation is these teams will be at their absolute peak to know what it is to sort of play a team of the quality of the Matildas, right? And I think, again, Malawi still brought their absolute best to step up and play for the occasion. And I can assure you, in front of a home crowd, Kenya will be looking to do the same. And India, knowing that the last time that they played a team like this, it ended up being 11-0 in Perth. So there's a lot to prove across the board there. And it is, as I go back to, it's a really solid learning environment for the bulk of the squad there. You mentioned one of the players that came on was Kennedy. Why are we bringing on Kennedy? I look at someone like an Izzy Gomez, and I'm just thinking, like, this is prime real estate for you to make a name here. Like, we can talk about it until we're black and blue in the face, like, can't we?
We probably could, to be honest, and maybe one day we will. Maybe one day we'll just do the unfiltered version of the Dubcast, where we set up in a studio somewhere. We'll make sure it's in person, and literally we're just going to have like an unleashed 4-hour episode where we just give all of our unfiltered, uncensored thoughts on Australian football, and we'll I imagine very quickly be encouraged not to be in any more press boxes. For the not too distant future. Like, last thing I want to touch on from this game in particular was, again, I want to stick with Malawi for a moment. The offside trap they kept on playing worked to a T.
To the point that it actually got a little bit annoying, because there was 2 or 3 offside goals in there as well. And I mentioned Rasso. Rasso didn't have a great game. Rasso got caught offside multiple times. She ended up getting a really bizarre yellow card. It was almost as if the ball had been played in at like a completely normal tempo. She's naturally gone in to finish it. You see footballers at all levels do that. They just, they get a little chance to tap in their goal. They're going to do it regardless. Like, the idea that she's just completely ran off and ignored the referee's advice is crazy. So that was a really bizarre yellow card, and that the look on her face, I think, said it all. But Malawi were phenomenal. Again, for a team that's lost 5-0, for a team that's 140 places beyond us in the rankings, for a team that didn't have their best players around to really spur on a decent performance. They were brilliant, and that's another reason why the youthfulness and the exuberance would have been a lot better to sort of cut through when they were holding that really high line. Because I think again, the 2 of those goals as well from the second and third goals were keeping mistakes as well. I mean, Shediak's one was sort of fumbled by the keeper. I mean, not that she was ever really going to get that's probably a bit disrespectful, because it was a really good finish, but the fact that it has sort of been palmed into the net ultimately. And Kerr's goal was just, she shouldn't have even had a sniff. The keeper's just completely fumbled it, so I think that's quite a disservice to the back line as well, because they could have kept it a lot tighter for a lot longer into the game as well. And it really, for me, I actually thought it was a pretty entertaining sort of fixture on the part of how well they were supplying that offside trap.
Yep. Absolutely, 100% agree. I know I said that was the last thing. I just realised we do need to talk about Letitia McKenna here. So obviously, her sister, was courted by Croatia, attended a Croatian national team camp, and a lot of people maybe thought, we might lose Letitia McKenna as well. She's part of the squad now. She's a capped Matilda. Obviously, could still, change because of the way eligibility and everything works. It's not a competitive game. Although I'm sure one day in the future, the FIFA Series will be considered capped competitive fixtures. But not only that, Letitia McKenna came in, basically did what she's done for Melbourne City, and just immediately went straight to work, and was rewarded with a goal on debut. Matt, just fantastic, debut for Letitia McKenna. It doesn't get much better than that.
And I'll just go back to the fact that, I wanted to see her play for longer. I think that's the kind of player that would have been the perfect sort of impact sub at half time. So, the Tajan McKenna case is interesting to me because I think that just speaks to the fact that there is a really good youthful depth as well within Australia as well. And I obviously know Tajan pretty well from her time at Glory, right? But yeah, I mean, WA girl as well, Letitia. So, really, really awesome in that sense as well. I think speaks to Melbourne City's, production line as well, with the influence from City. So, no, just beautiful moment. Someone that's really deserved to seize the moment. And, again, someone that's been waiting on the wings for a little while. So, again, at this level, with the environment considered, with how late the goal, to still be pushing when it's 4-0 against Malawi. It's just, there's everything to compliment about it. And, full respect to her. And full respect to, I think, again, a lot of these A-League level players that are pushing to build on that depth, because it's the one thing that is blatantly obvious with what we all know the Matildas really need. So, full props to Letitia for the finish. Quality finish as well. Great goal. Yeah.
Yep. If you want to see more of the youthful exuberance coming through the ranks, you can watch the young Matildas in action as they have a quarter-final matchup on Sunday evening, Australian Eastern Standard Time, against North Korea, the Under-20 Women's Asian Cup. The winner of the game will qualify for the Under-20 Women's World Cup in Poland later this year. It's only the 4 semi-finalists going through, so it is a must-win game, not only for Asian Cup, trophy success, or continuing their campaign for the young Matildas, but also if they want to play at the World Cup. Matt, obviously coming up against the reigning and defending Asian Cup and World Cup champions at that level in North Korea, so a very tough game.
Yeah, it's I think it's just one of those things where at U20 level within Asia, we've been off the mark for a little while now. We had that really good one campaign in Costa Rica, and even then, the likes of Brazil and Spain made light work of us, and that was a real awakening. And then came the Colombia campaign, which was even worse. And then since then, we've not been able to make it back. I think it speaks volumes to the fact that, again, this is a North Korea team that have a lot of the precedent at their level. We've had the likes of Ivani Prakash and things step up, and there's been a lot of positive signs there with players that I think have actually been blooded through, the semi-professional ranks, and just a really quality teams on paper. I think it's a team that's quite likeable. But I'll be honest with you in saying that I'm personally not really putting that much stock into it. I'm not really that interested. This is a North Korea team that's obviously the world champions, but they scored 19 goals in the group stage. Listen, they're going to beat us by a few goals. I'm sorry, spoiler alert. And I usually, when I was doing more work with front page football back in the day, this is the sort of tournament that I would have been over, every sort of page of the book, back to front cover, I would have been all over the tournament. But I've just I've seen the way that the last few cycles have played out, and I've not wanted to put too much stock in what this generation's going to offer, because I don't see us being at the World Cup. That's probably an open message for them to come out and shock North Korea. That would be pretty awesome, because then, yeah, of course, I'm going to be completely interested. But the 5-2 loss to Japan for me, I think, is reference enough that the team are just a little bit behind. The one thing I will say about this is it's very nice to see the likes of Thailand and Jordan having missed our Asian Cup here in Australia. Nice to see countries like that back in the fold and producing a really high level at the U20s. Showing that dedication to women's football within Asia has been a really important thing. But as far as that U20s game is concerned, it's going to be a long shot for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, you just look at the last two campaigns, right? So, Colombia, the World Cup there, that was the first time in 20 years that the young Matildas had qualified for the Under-20 World Cup on merit. Obviously, that 2022 campaign in Costa Rica came because North Korea withdrew from the tournament, as the fallout from COVID was still being felt around the world, and they were using the results from the previous tournament before COVID to determine who would go into that Under-20 Women's World Cup from Asia. So there's only going to be one way to find out, and that is to actually watch the game and see what happens. But for Matt Olsen, my name is Poletti. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want more Dubcast content, you can have a look at, it'll be appearing on your screen now, a video I did taking you behind the scenes of the NPL New South Wales as I commentated on a day I was suffering from a mental breakdown. So I did a little behind the scenes video from that. And if you're listening on the podcast, we'll put a link in the episode description for you. But thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a pleasure having you here, and we'll speak to you next time.